Into the wild I'll go, and into the wild I am. It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home. Into the wild I'll go, and into the wild I am. It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home.
Welcome to the Freebirth Society podcast. This is a radical space for women who are ready to celebrate their autonomous choices in birth, motherhood, and beyond. Together, we'll learn about wild birth through personal narrative, we'll explore the politics of birth, and we'll analyze everything that relates to our lives as women from a feminist perspective. Here's your host, Emily Saldea.
It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home.
Hello, women. Wow, I'm so happy to be back with you all again. Welcome to season 6. Returning to this podcast season after season is such a fun part of my life, and I'm just in a constant state of awe watching the impact of these stories as they spread across our beautiful planet and throughout womankind. Every day, I'm reminded of how women's stories have the power to change the lives for so many other women and their families. So thank you. Thank you for being here with me. The tides are truly shifting for the better. I see it. I'll share a quick life update with you before we dive into our first episode of our 6th season. So since you last heard from me back in May, it's been pretty nonstop over here. I know I say that all the time. The second annual Matriarch Rising Festival over summer solstice was bigger and better than the year prior, and I got to experience it while being so very pregnant. It's pretty surreal to me that next year I'll have a baby in my arms the next time we all gather. Our staff size doubled, so it made the whole thing just so much easier, and there were so many highlights, but one of them was laying in bed on Wednesday, the day before we DJ'd, and Hannah Grace and I learning how to DJ the whole day, and then headlining the last night of the party of the festival as a DJ duo that we call Moonlit Yoni. It was really, really fun. And watching my mom and my sister experience the festival with so much joy and integration, and of course meeting so many women that I've known from online and real life, it was all just, it's such a dream. The families that live around us have been settling into this sweet little community that we are co-creating here, and it feels so good to have my sisters around me, supporting me and my family during this pregnancy. And don't worry, you'll get to hear all about my birth later in this season, however it manifests, as well as a 40-week wrap-up with my husband, Johnny. We're going to do that again like we did with our first daughter. My daughter, speaking of her, Suniye, is in such a sweet phase of life and is just so excited to meet her little baby. She's actually asked to handle all of the maternal duties except for breastfeeding. Life with her just keeps getting better and better, and we recently brought her back to Hawaii where she was born as a last trip, just the 3 of us. It was so special to show her the house that she was born in, the mountains where her placenta was buried, and just to soak in the last moments of her as our only kid. The Freebirth Society private online membership continues to grow, and that's where I spend most of my online time these days. We have 12 online circles and workshops every month, a bustling community forum, a member directory for easy offline connection, and the exclusive Radical Birthkeeper directory. So if you align with the values of Freebirth Society and are looking for women near you who do as well, head over to the link in the show notes and apply to join. And the Radical Birthkeeper School begins again February 1st, 2023. I've been dropping hints all year about the big makeover that we're giving the program, and I'm about to reveal it very, very soon. So stay tuned. Enrollment will open this fall, and I'm really excited. Okay, so for today's episode, it seems so fitting that we would open up with Arielle's birth story, as she's one of my very best friends and the first woman in our crew to birth in our little town. So you might remember her from her episode on herbalism here on the podcast. And today Arielle shares her journey from a manufactured emergency C-section to her simple, perfect, community-supported free birth. I am Emily Saldea, and this is the Freebirth Society podcast, Season 6. Enjoy. Welcome, women. Welcome to Season 6. We are opening up Season 6 with my best friend, Arielle Martinez. Hi. This is something we've never done before, where we are going to obviously do this together and share a mic. So we'll see how that goes. But Arielle is here for another week. And so we thought it would be fun to get this episode done in person. Okay, so you might be familiar with Arielle if you follow me on Instagram, because we shared a lot about her postpartum and her FBAC, a free birth after C-section. So yeah, just kick us off with your first story with your daughter, who is my daughter's best friend. So cute. And sad story though. So tell us about kind of what your vision was, what you thought you were signing up for, and then obviously into what goes down. And then I really want you to spend some time on at least the fourth trimester and what that was like for you, because you had a very average experience, right, for a North American woman. And it was horrible.
Right.
But did you even know it was horrible?
Not at the time.
Right. That's so interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, take it away.
Yeah. Well, I'm so happy that we're doing this in person together. So I just want to say that before it feels appropriate with our stories. I became pregnant with my daughter when I was 26, and I hadn't ever really thought about birth at all. I grew up hearing horror stories from my mom and my aunties, and just, the general horror stories that we hear, episiotomies, abuse, but it was obviously very talked about like it was normal. After I became pregnant and I realized that I was going to have to give birth, I felt a lot of fear. I really didn't want this experiences of the women in my family to be my own. And so I thought I put a lot of work into setting that up so it wouldn't happen.
What'd that look like?
It looked like leaving my OB at around 16 weeks pregnant, transferring to a certified midwife's care in a hospital setting. Taking all the right courses and listening to all the right podcasts about how to get your natural birth in the hospital.
Lies.
Really, and I had really deluded myself into thinking that I was going to be the exception to the rule, which, I see and hear from so many women. I was a very healthy, active woman who didn't have any health issues. I had all these reasons of why I was going to be the exception. And I'm pretty assertive, and I knew I could advocate for myself pretty well. And so I didn't think I was going to be like the women of this other stories I've heard. And, I'm sure it's really easy every time you hear a story, a bad birth story in the hospital, it's really easy to be like, oh, well, you should have done this, or you should have done that. And that was kind of the mindset I had.
And your midwife said this wouldn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. My midwife looked at me in the eyes and said, you will not have a C-section.
Spoiler alert.
I did.
She did.
Yeah.
Wow. How do they live with themselves?
Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot of disassociation, I think.
It's so dark.
But I had an ironclad birth plan, at the top of my birth plan, I wrote, I expect informed consent at all times. I had all these disclaimers on it. It was very thorough. We looked over it together, me and my midwife, and talked about it. And she was so on board, like they always are. And then at past 41 weeks, I had to get that mandatory ultrasound and stress test and
non-stress test. Yeah, an ST. Yeah.
And the ultrasound revealed that from her perception, or what we could see via the ultrasound, that there was less amniotic fluid in there than my midwife was comfortable with. And this is kind of the turning point of my story. So I've thought about it a lot, and I think the appropriate thing would have been done if I was seeking a wise woman's care would have been to be like, hey, when was the last time that you drank water? How are you feeling? What's your stress level? You're past 41 weeks. It's your first pregnancy. Like, tell me what's going on.
Well, yes, but that is on the precedent that was even accurate.
Right.
That
1000%.
You know what
yes,
I mean?
Yes.
Like, because it wasn't.
Yeah.
And no one even knows
what
fluid even is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes,
Yeah.
but I think even one layer deeper,
Of course,
it's nonsense.
Yes, it shouldn't have even have been something that was pathologized in the first place.
But if you are going to be with a medical provider, they know that it's the baby's urine. They know that it's, even if they believe the lie of the ultrasound, it is most likely dehydration. And unless your baby has like a serious kidney issue, which is super rare, it's going to be just drink water.
Yeah.
Right. But then they can't convince you.
Yeah.
Into having your induction.
Yeah. But I hadn't drank water since the night before, and it was like a 1 p.m. appointment. So of course I was dehydrated. But instead she said, well, if I let you go longer, and you come back and your fluid's lower, then I'm going to transfer you to a high risk OB, and he will induce you, and you'll probably have a C-section. So I would recommend induction today. And so I was like, well, of course I'm going to risk induction with you versus induction. If this is my story, that's what I'm going to do.
And it feels like choice.
It felt like a choice. Yeah. And of course I was impatient. I was, in the window, the veil was thin. I was already under a lot of influence.
Yeah.
So, and the funny thing about it, even more indicative of like, if we're going to pathologize the dehydration, like my stress test, I was having consistent contractions during my stress test. Everything pointed to dehydration. Like as soon as they put fluids in me at the hospital, my contractions stopped.
Well, that's what I was just going to say,
so dumb.
Is even in that paradigm, the argument would be just give you fluids.
Yeah.
Like that's still nonsense and not what the response should be. But even in that paradigm, just give you fluids then.
Right. So,
but it's not about that.
Yeah.
It's just smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
So did you go right over, or like, did you go home, pack a bag?
I went home. I stopped at the chiropractor, got an adjustment because I was I was going to control everything to set myself up for my perfect unicorn hospital birth. So I went
unicorn induction.
Yeah, my unicorn induction. I revised my birth plan to allow for Pitocin,
It's so sad.
And I went home, packed a bag, whatever. We went to the hospital.
How nervous were you? This is a big deal. Like, were you worried about Luna with the low fluid nonsense? No.
I wasn't nervous. That's the funny thing, is I wasn't nervous about it at all. I was just, my feeling of like impatience. Because here's what I should actually preface now, is that I was self-employed and I had a story in my head that I could only take 6 weeks of maternity leave. And I started that at 40 weeks. So at that point, I really set myself up for a lot of sabotage, because every day past 40 weeks that I went, that was 1 day less I would have to spend with my baby. And so I really wanted to have a baby sooner than later.
So many women deal with that.
Yeah. And that was what I felt.
I've been with women back when I was a doula who were on such a tight mat leave schedule. They would schedule their C-sections to optimize their time with their babies. How dark is that?
Yeah.
Like, because it's well intended from the mother.
I didn't have a boss telling me I could only take 6 weeks.
Yeah.
That was myself.
But culturally, it's not like you made that up in a vacuum.
It was me thinking that my clients wouldn't stay alongside me if I took an extra couple weeks, you know? So,
well, also the 6 week mark
is stupid.
It's like a thing in our culture though too.
Yeah.
Okay. So you go, you're not scared, you're impatient. There might even be some excitement.
Yeah.
but like a shift from thinking you're gonna have a natural birth to all of a sudden being induced is like pretty big.
But I still was the thought that like I could have a natural induction. Like I could have a vaginal birth, a vaginal unepidural birth with Pitocin, you know, like that's what they tell you. Like, you know, that's what you hear.
A vaginal birth
without an epidural.
Oof.
Because then you can't even really say unmedicated because the Pitocin is medicine, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
and the Cervidil and
so I ended up not needing Pitocin at all. But I did get that excruciating Foley balloon.
Right. Oh, so you didn't get Cervidil?
I got Cervidil and the Foley balloon.
Okay. So for anyone who doesn't know, Cervidil is the gel that is inserted internally and it's put on the cervix. The intention is to soften the cervix. It sits there for 12 hours, usually. I don't know what yours was.
It was like an hour.
It was like an hour? Well, okay. It's most commonly 12, but that's okay. And then, so after that, they placed the Foley balloon, which you should Google what it looks like if you don't know, but it's literally this little balloon that they use to pry the woman's cervix open.
It's a torture device. I've never heard a woman say that it wasn't excruciating. Like it's the worst pain I've ever felt probably in my life.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was intense. It was really intense.
Ooh.
Yeah. And then of course, what happens once it's inside of you and they fill it up with the water or whatever is in there, you know,
you have to lay.
Your body starts trying to push it out because it's like this foreign object. So I was having, you know, back to back contractions. They were very intense. And
you're on IV.
I'm on an IV.
Yeah.
And, but like for the most part, like this is the weird part is like it was night. Nobody was around. My midwife someone else was in labor. And so she was with them the whole time. And so I was pretty much ignored until the balloon fell out. So
that's common.
Yeah, I was just in the bathroom with my partner and
you weren't forced to stay in bed.
Not after a while. Yeah.
That's
I was
nice.
able to get up, or maybe I just did. I don't know. We just did because nobody was in there. And I was, you know, laboring in the bathroom and the balloon fell out, and then the midwife came in, did the first cervical check and said that I was 8 centimeters dilated. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna have a baby soon then. Totally. This is great, sweet. It had only been a few hours. And I was like, this is awesome. I can do this. I felt like so elated, right? And
it's like best news that you can get in an induction.
I felt so great. I was like, this is happening. We're going to do it. I felt like renewed. My energy was high. There was a lot of positivity. And then the next contraction that came, my water broke.
Whoa.
And when my water broke, everything changed because I had the nurse and the midwife and everyone came running in the room. Nobody told me what was going on. They were just like, get in the bed now, rolling me around, putting me in all these different positions. And the fluids were clear. I guess what happened is I was being monitored, and when my water broke, something happened with the heart rate, and they were trying to get it to come back or like not be so distressed or whatever. So that was when it all changed, because then I was in a bed. I was confined to a bed. I was confined to the hands and knees position because that was the only way that the monitoring was like acceptable to their standards. And I, and of course my body was still going into labor. And so I was approaching this time where, in physiological birth, you're supposed to like really transcend into a different state of consciousness. And so I remember having to pull myself down from that in order to advocate for myself, which I think I did, which it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. But there were times when they were wanting to put one of those internal monitors where they put a screw in your baby's scalp, and I remember like every ounce in my being, like having to like pull every ounce of strength to like say no, and then continue to say no until they left me alone about it.
Birth and war.
Yeah.
It makes me think of trying to talk to the cops on mushrooms.
Exactly. That was exactly
the same paradigm.
Yeah.
Have you ever done that?
No, but I could imagine what it would be like. Yeah.
It's like One time my friend and I were on mushrooms in some state park, and we like weren't supposed to be there because there was a fire warning. It was out in California. Anyway, these cops roll up, and same thing. I mean, I did it in my birth too when I transferred, but I was like, come down here and keep your shit together because you have to be cool.
Yeah, literally like pulling your consciousness back into be like a logical
normal,
being.
Sober person.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. But it's way worse what you're saying. So they didn't do the.
No, they didn't do the screw.
Oh my God.
And after an hour, I think my midwife came in and she said, you know, I think you're going to need a C-section. And if you do, you're going to want the epidural. You know, you need an epidural. So I think that you should get an epidural right now. So that way
it's just good planning.
Have it for your C-section.
Oh my God.
And like, I was exhausted. I was so tired, all of it. And
and the drama.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And in my mind, I was just like, she's like, I still trusted her, you know, which is weird because of all the things that were going on. I still trusted her. And so I was like, okay, I guess that's going to be my story. I guess I'm going to get the epidural, still thinking that I'm going to have a vaginal birth, right? That was going to be like, what would save me to get a vaginal birth, even though she just said I'm going to have a C-section, right? So as soon as I got the epidural, she did another cervical check and said, yes. I heard her say, it's a cord. She didn't say it to me. She didn't say it to my partner. She said it to the nurse. Yep, it's a prolapse. And then the room was flooded with people. And
so a cord prolapse.
Yeah.
The cord fell through.
Yeah. So my cord was through and the baby's head was possibly compressing it, which, you know, the risks for that, there's evidence now that I hadn't seen. There's newer evidence now suggesting that the use of a fully balloon catheter can up your chances for having a cord prolapse because indirectly it's rupturing your membranes with artificial membrane rupture. So that totally lines up with what happened. And yeah,
all of it, the fingers inside you, the stress, it just creates dysfunction, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's very clear that like, and it's very clear to me that my body wasn't going into labor yet for a reason, right? And like maybe that reason was that my daughter was still trying to get the cord out of the way, you know, because my daughter I found out later that my daughter had like a quadruple nuchal cord. And that was actually one of the things that gave me the most peace about my story, because you always hear that a nuchal cord is like a sign of intelligence because the baby's getting it out of the way so they can come through. And I was kind of like, well, why didn't my baby do that? You know, like in the stages of grief, I was trying to figure out, you know, what had gone on. And when I saw that it was a quadruple nuchal cord, I was like, she was trying so hard. She was trying so hard. Like, it's like she knew what was going to happen and was trying so hard to like give us what I was trying to give us as well. And like, it just wasn't possible in that system, you know?
I just interviewed Sister Morningstar recently, and a quote she said quite a few times. It's so obvious, but it was perfect. She said, if you stress the mom, you stress the baby.
Of course.
You know, and of course, but it's, if you stress the mom, you stress the baby. And this notion that we can like put women's bodies through, I mean, that's an obscene amount of stress, even though so many women listening, that's their story too. This is so common. Most women get PIT epidural. And so it's become so normalized. And so it can seem like it's less like disruptive or violent on the spectrum or whatever. But that is such a stressful story. And so again, it would create dysfunction because it would create stress in Luna.
Right. I had heard, I heard her say that to the nurse, but there, if I was any other person, I probably wouldn't have known. I might not have known what that was, or I might not have heard her. Right. And so next thing I know, I'm getting rolled down an aisle. There's a resident in my bed with her hand up inside of me, holding the baby up, like, super, like, I don't know how deep she was, but I imagine she was pretty far in there. And,
you already had the epi?
I'd already had the epi, but like, none of this was all happening to me. I wasn't being aware. And like, that's the scene that would run through my head at 3 o'clock in the morning later on, was like being rolled down this cart. And in my mind, you know, the epidural had happened so soon that they still thought they were going to have to put me under general. And in my mind, I wanted to be out of that situation so bad. I was like, I hope I just have to be under general. Like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. Just put me under general.
Totally.
Like, I was just an attempt to disassociate
Of
from the
course,
experience
you'd be
because I was,
tortured.
yeah,
Of
but I didn't see
course.
that at the time. You know, I was just like surviving, and I didn't have to be, thank God. But you know, and I was still trying to control the situation. Like, I was still telling my midwife, you know, thinking about my partner who had no idea what was going on. Somebody needs to find him. Someone needs to tell him what's going on. Someone needs to, you know,
Of course.
right.
Because it's an emergency C-section, so he's not going to get like prepped and
Yeah.
included.
And, you know, his story, come to find out later, you know, in this hospital, every time a baby's born, they play a lullaby. And so he's all of a sudden, he doesn't know what's going on. All of a sudden, his wife's gone. And so he's just sitting there waiting for that lullaby, and they never played it when she was born. And so he was sitting there thinking that his baby was dead.
Oh my God.
You know, and had no idea what was going on and was so scared. We were separated. It was terrible.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah. When Luna was born, they pulled her out and they all laughed. And I remember being like, what, why? And they wouldn't tell me. And I would assume it was because of the nuchal cord, like, because to them that would have been crazy. But they were all like, whoa, ha ha ha, whoa. And I was like, and then they just like held her up, and she was like screaming in the air, and they held her up so I could see her, and she was just crying. And I just remember looking and being like, this is the first time I'm ever gonna see my daughter, and like, I don't know her, because it just felt so weird, you know, like, that's not how I'm supposed to see my baby for the first time.
That's so sad.
And then yeah, I did get my baby relatively soon in those experiences, you know, and yeah, she was on my chest, and it was just really weird. I remember like closing my eyes in the OR, just trying to feel something with this baby on my chest. But it was just like, I was so numb because I had like numbed myself out to like be able to experience.
Well, and you were literally numb. And also, as soon as they take the baby out, the anesthesiologist gives a whole new cocktail of narcotics and sedatives.
Right.
And so, I mean, to feel is like a pretty hard ask.
Yeah.
There's a lot of drugs going through you.
Yeah. Well, and then of course I had a reaction to the drugs, and I started puking, and then they pushed some anti-puke meds on me, and I had like a panic attack and was screaming. And, you know, luckily my partner was in there holding our baby while all this was happening.
Oh, so he was allowed
in after she was born. Yeah. And, then, you know, I don't remember much until they gave the baby to me to nurse. I remember like she looked at me with her little wise little eyes, and she just clamped on my breast and started nursing right away.
Cute.
And that was like, I feel like that like unlocked something, you know, like I was able to feel some sort of hormonal cascade or some sort of feeling of bonding and whatever. And I was able to like, it just like ignited this like fierceness of being like, this baby realization, like this baby relies on me. And I'm the only, if anything that we've learned from this situation is I'm the only one that has our best interest at heart. And like, it's up to me to like protect this like beautiful little baby, like who's staring in my eyes, nursing right now. Like, I'm keeping her alive.
And you're like mutilated and bandaged and coming off drugs, and like, just what a impossible disorientation that is to come into your like protector in that
through trauma.
Oh.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you know, the rest of our experience in the hospital was relatively simple. There was no abuse by the nurses. Nobody, you know, Luna was kept with us the entire time. She was never separated from us. And, you know, my new fierce self protecting my baby, you know, first thing I said to the nurse was like, she's sleeping with me. I don't care what you say, you know, like, so she, you know, we were able to.
How'd they respond to that?
I had two older nurses who just kind of seemed like more chill, who were just kind of like, okay, I'll just write that you declined the bassinet. And then I had a younger nurse the last day who tried to come in my room at like 3:00 in the morning and like make an example of me, you know, to like she had like a little trainee, and she came in, she's like, woke me up and was like, I'm going to take this baby because you're not supposed to have her. And I was like, no, you're not. And like, I obviously won the battle.
there are stories in our
Mhm.
membership and from women I've worked with who have had CPS or social services called on them for not bassineting
Ugh,
the baby,
that's terrible.
you know? So
Yeah.
it's always so tricky with these stories when I hear like women like stood their ground,
Mhm.
because I feel like it creates, like, of course we should at least try that, but the risk of doing that sometimes can be really bad.
Yeah.
And it's so confusing because we're never actually in control in
Right.
those
Right.
spaces.
Mhm.
Ugh.
Nursing, breastfeeding went great. Luckily I had, my milk came in on day 3. My daughter latched great. There was no issue. My nipples were sore for like an hour, like just like very minimal issues.
So when you go home and are entering postpartum, at that point, how are you thinking about what just went down?
I had framed it as my midwife was my savior. She knew I had a cord prolapse. That's why she gave me the epidural, because she knew that was what it was. And she suggested the epidural so that way I wouldn't have to be put under general.
Oh, she did you a favor.
She did me a favor. Yeah.
So wise.
Yeah. And
wow. Okay.
yeah, so that's what I was thinking. And I also had a little bit of, maybe my water would have gotten lower and lower, and I would have, if I had gone home, my baby might have died, or, whatever. I didn't really know. I wasn't thankful. I hadn't reached the entire reframe of like, oh, if I hadn't given birth in the system, like my baby would have died. I played around with it, but there was a big part of me that knew, like, because like of what happened, like I knew the induction caused it. I just hadn't realized my midwife's role. I had really like held on to like having her be my savior because I trusted her. And of course that was a big heartbreak to realize that like she was part of my story and the betrayal,
So tell us a little bit about your postpartum before we shift.
I was aware to an extent. I gave myself, 3 full weeks in bed, just snuggling my baby. We had a similar, we had a postpartum experience that a lot of people do where, we had visitors, but no one to come take care of me, just like visitors to come hang out. And, my husband did a lot of the work around the house. So he was also dealing with his own stuff. So he was kind of like, with the birth, and he was just kind of taking care of me, and I was taking care of the baby. And it was just kind of like this weird haze. There wasn't like the joy that there should have been. Although I really enjoyed those first few weeks, of course, snuggling with my baby and nursing. But, at 4.5, 5 weeks postpartum, I went back to work, post C-section. And
that's nuts.
Crazy.
5 weeks after surgery.
Yeah. And like I went back to work like,
and she's a hairdresser, so she's on her feet.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah. So that was crazy. And like, of course, my husband and my daughter had a terrible time.
Oh,
my daughter
she stayed
cried.
with him.
Yeah. My husband stayed home with my daughter while I went back to work. We made our schedules work so that could happen. And my daughter just cried for me till I come home every day. And so we switched it up so that, she would be with him and cry for 4 hours instead of 6. And then she'd come nurse, and like, I would just wear her at work because that's just, and, she never took a bottle. Like she was just really, we both were really, neither of us wanted to be apart. And so, I don't know why.
Well, so much repair was trying to happen.
Yeah. And I don't know why we just stayed in that stuck cycle for so long. It messed up my husband's ability to experience like a happy infancy, like with her, because she had this story that like she hated him. And like I just kept going to work. Like a robot, knowing that my baby was screaming.
Ugh,
it was so weird.
Intense.
And we did what we could to make it better, but like now I'm just like, now that I know, like now that I am who I am now, I'm like, if something like that wasn't working, I just would have changed it.
Totally.
Totally. But it wasn't in my reality. It didn't even seem tangible. It wasn't even a thought.
It probably didn't even occur to you.
It wasn't. even
it's just what you do, and it's what
Mhm.
everyone around you does.
Mhm.
Whew.
And I
I'm like
had-
picturing you trying to give a shit about someone's hair,
Yeah.
like while all of this stress, is in your field,
Mhm.
and being like, oh, you're gonna do bangs,
Yeah.
it's just like, oh my god, sounds like hell.
Yeah. But the amazing the thing that came out of that ultimately was, I'm sure we'll get into this, but the instant I found out I was pregnant the second time, I quit my job.
Mhm.
Because I was like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to go through that hell again.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have the pressure of going into labor on my client's schedule. I'm not going to have the pressure of having to go back to work before I'm ready. I'm not going to have the pressure of trying to make a baby take a bottle,
I mean, that is what's the right word, gift, in some of these tragic stories, is it's like so bad that women are like, never again.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the gift feels maybe kind of like a strange word to use, but I don't have a better one right now, but in all the birth trauma debriefs and stuff that I do, it's like, okay, like really integrate it, really understand the cost of what has happened. So how does that whole thing leave you? And then take us into Cleo, because I know that when you and I became friends, you were not having any more kids. Like both you and your husband were like one and done. Will you speak a little bit to that? And then like the shift of being open to a new baby, and then you just take us into her pregnancy.
I mean, yeah, I didn't want any more kids for a long time. I had said no. And I think if a part of me had gone in the other direction of like, thank God the system saved my baby, and I had chosen to stay and remain trauma bonded to the system, I wouldn't have ever had any more kids. I would have happily had my non-hormonal copper IUD inside of me for 10 years and got it replaced until I was menopausal and been fine, because I knew I would have never, ever had a baby in the system again like that. And if that was what the system had to offer me, then it wouldn't be possible. Luckily, there's another way. So,
and your babies are 4 years apart. And so much growth happens in that time, right?
Yeah. And I think, I had a big shift actually, not too shortly before she was conceived, where I was with you here, and it was the first time you had met my partner, and you were here, our friend Isabella was here, and of course birth came up a lot, and my husband was asking a lot of questions that I would have considered like ignorant, and I probably would have responded really snottily to, like I would have been like I remember he asked Izzy if she did cervical checks, and if I would have responded, I would have been like, of course she doesn't, what are you, dumb? That's stupid, but she just answered with so much grace, and like, oh no, I don't do that, that would be introducing bacteria, that's not conducive to physiological birth, blah blah blah. And I kind of realized in that time that like I had kind of made this story up that we weren't going to have any kids, because at this point I was like, okay, if we have another kid, we'd free birth, but I don't think that either of us would be ready, or like we'd have to do a lot of work to get there. And I realized like, oh, my husband actually doesn't need to do a lot of work to get there. I'm making up that he does because I need to do work to get there. You know what I mean?
But he's such a good example of like, didn't do any work, doesn't really know anything.
He doesn't know anything at all. My husband's not someone who is like this like enlightened, crunchy man. Like,
no,
he's very much the opposite. And so
also, where are the enlightened crunchy men? That's not a real thing.
But he's not who you would expect.
He's like a normal guy.
He's just a normal guy. He uses Tide Free and Clear because I won't let him use scents. But
yeah, he would use scented Tide if he was allowed.
Tide grudgingly. So
and he's from Dominican Republic, where everyone gets C-sections. He comes from a normalized line of serious trauma births.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He's had 3 traumatic with the 3 women in the 3 birth experiences he's had in his life from women close to him have all been extremely traumatic, almost death,
but the difference about him that is so amazing and really worth giving credit to or honor to or whatever is that he's a good example of a man who, to your point, like didn't really know much, doesn't really know anything about birth,
doesn't care to really,
doesn't really care
Yeah.
to. That's all great and fine. And defaulted to your desires, authority, information, education, which obviously both you and I feel very strongly
Yeah.
about, like that's required in a healthy relationship, you
Right.
know, and you both have your lanes, and mothering is
That's
your
mine.
lane,
Yeah.
right? Because duh, women. And because we're touching on this because so many women believe the story that their husband has to be like totally into it and know everything and take the complete guide with them and read all the books and have no fear and be super excited about it. And like, that's not really what I've ever seen to be how most couples do this. But if there's the fundamental respect and support, right? It's like some basic ass shit, then yeah, he doesn't actually have to know all the things you do.
Yeah.
You're the one that's going to navigate this. You're the one that's going to care the most. You're the one that's going to be thinking about all of this. And I see a lot of women get like upset that their partners don't have a big interest in reading the books, but of course they don't.
Yeah.
They're gonna just like show up and watch. And actually, I'm gonna say this publicly, it is a red flag for me when the men are overly involved.
Yeah.
Because it's weird. Like they often, I'm making a generalization, but often the men that are like overly involved are narcissists, and they make it about them.
Yeah. There's requirements.
Ew.
Yeah.
Okay. So over those 4 years, you're joining Freebirth Society, we're becoming friends. Your life is changing, right? Like you're finding herbalism, there's a lot of change between these 2 children.
Yeah. So I guess I joined Freebirth Society because I had been listening to the podcast, and
at what point?
I was listening to it while I was pregnant with Luna.
Oh.
Yeah. And I had even like entertained the idea of like, well, if I go into labor, maybe I'll just stay home. I thought that I would get that birth in the hospital, which is silly. But I did. I thought I'd be the exception. And of course, once the induction happened too, like accidentally, it's one of those women who say they want to have pre-birth, they have nothing to do with it. They don't move forward with it at all.
Yeah.
So I ended up, when there's an episode with Diana about healing birth trauma, and that was the first time that I had really felt validated that like I was allowed to be upset, you know. And the next day on Instagram, you had posted that there was going to be a healing birth trauma group on Facebook, which no longer exists. But so I downloaded Facebook and joined the Freebirth Society membership or community through there.
Oh, gee.
Yeah. And then when you switched over to the membership model, I just switched over.
Yeah.
And so I was part of the, I think there were like 30 women at first in the membership. And during this time, obviously as a new mom, I was a new mom. I hadn't broken free of like the expectations of my own life, and the expectations of like the people in my circles at the time of how I would parent. And so there was a lot of, I don't know how I would describe it, but I was under the impression that if I was going to take responsibility for my child and live outside the allopathic model, I had to know everything. Right. And like, I had to be able to really step up and, treat my kids out. But now I look at it so much differently. Like now I just know, like, it just flows. Right. But in my mind, I'm, it's like women who take their blood pressure for no reason. when
Yeah,
you're
it
pregnant and
happens
having a
in
wild pregnancy.
layers.
It happens in layers,
Yeah.
you know? So I was initially started studying herbalism so that I could rely on myself to take care of my daughter, thinking from an allopathic mindset.
It's like, gosh, I remember that too. And it's like the first layer out is like, we have to become the doctors.
Yes.
It's like replacing, whereas then later, like how it is now is like, there's actually a whole different paradigm and consciousness to exist in. But in the beginning, we are the pediatricians. Yeah, totally.
Exactly.
That's
so I was studying herbal pediatrics.
Oh my God. Well, hey, it did you well.
It did me well because
you learned a lot.
What happens when you're working with the plants is they reveal themselves to you in new ways, and you learn so much just working with them. And so I, ultimately ended up, evolving into an herbalist, and I make, my own plant medicines, and they're not a part of, there's no herbal pediatrics at all, but they are a part of they support us, I always knew that the only way I would have another baby would be completely outside the system. And as time went on and you and I became closer, and, I did all the events, any event that you do, I'd sign up for and come to, and we became close. And I went to the Matriarch Rising Festival. Half the women were bleeding, half of the women were ovulating. I was ovulating. And when I got home from the festival, Cleo was conceived, which happened to so many women.
Yeah. The joke of coming to the festival is that you're going to go home and either get divorced or pregnant.
Yeah.
Depending on the health of your relationship.
Yeah. And it's so true, because now we're about 3 months out from the festival, and all the pregnancy announcements are rolling in.
And divorce.
And divorce.
Hey, you level up. What can I say?
It's an up leveling for sure.
Yeah, but even when you got pregnant, well, I mean, from me on the outside as your friend, you were never like, declaration, I changed my mind, I'm having a baby.
No.
You just like, were like, I think I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
And we were like, wait, what?
Yeah. So, I mean, that shift that I talked about, a few months prior, making that mental shift of like, oh, it's not my husband, Javier, that needs to do the work, it's myself. I feel like that realization, that was the work, was having the realization. There wasn't much work to be done because I'd already been doing it unconsciously the last few years. But I think
you were using him as like a scapegoat.
Yeah. Like he was the last, that idea was the last piece I had to shed. And I feel like that unlocked like the path for Cleo to be able to come down to me. She wasn't called in, she wasn't planned. She was allowed.
That's a funny meme. Not called in, not planned, but allowed.
Yeah. So I knew that, pregnancy
funny.
was a possibility, and I chose not to take the herbs I'd usually use to prevent pregnancy. And when my period didn't come, I didn't really think I was pregnant, but then I never tested. I had a couple, you and Izzy, aforementioned Isabella, look at my chart, and I was like, I think this is a pregnancy chart. Is this a pregnancy chart?
I remember that on Signal.
Yeah. So we all looked at my chart, and yes, it took me a while to come to terms that I was indeed pregnant. And once I did, it was just, I was like, okay, we're not doing the same thing as last time. I quit my job. I just
blossomed though.
Yeah.
Like you were so chill and happy.
Yeah.
And your herbalism stuff was taking off.
Yeah.
It wasn't new, but
yeah, it allowed, quitting my job allowed me to spend the focus on the things in my life that made me happy. And
I just love how it's all connected, like this free birth thing is not about free birth, but it like opens up, because you can have a free birth and not change at all and stay in an abusive marriage and be miserable and be broke and hate your life. I know those women. I have met those women. Or you can use it, or even the path of it, as this major catalyst. And you're a really good example of someone who, and we have lots of these women in our community who, rise from the ashes of their birth trauma and are like, fuck that was horrible. No. And so then what? Right. And then like, so meaning that like your career shift is a really big part of the story,
Yeah.
actually, because of where we are today.
Yeah.
You know, with it, it's a huge part of it, but it's completely intertwined. Like, could you imagine having all the gifts that you've had in your birth, your pregnancy, and your postpartum without that career change?
Yeah.
You know, like
No.
there's so much that comes together with this. It's so cool.
Yeah.
So what do you want to share about pregnancy?
I mean, pregnancy was just so chill.
You slept a lot.
I slept a lot.
Jealous.
We moved to the Dominican Republic for the winter.
Bought a house,
which had been a dream of ours that we talked about for years, but my career had been holding us to Omaha, where I'm from. I chilled. I ate a lot of food that wasn't always healthy, and learned a really important lesson about how sometimes it's not the health, but like that matters, but like that the food my mother-in-law prepared for me with like love and good intention was more nourishing for me than like the fact that it might not have had such good stuff in it. So that was like actually a really powerful thing for me to learn, because it let me let go of control. You know, my whole life I've just controlled everything and thought
tried to.
Yeah. And so like, you know, I'm slowly able to like, you know, that was a really pivotal point, because a lot of I see a lot of women who think, like we were talking about with the, you know, herbal pediatrics, that you know, they think that they have to become the pediatrician or the OBGYN or the midwife
nutritionist
and the nutritionist when they're having a wild pregnancy, and you don't, you know, like you just live your life,
just chill out.
And so the nutrition had kind of been something that I was really focused on, and then that shift allowed me to just really like let the rest of it just kind of.
You're also describing a shift from like mind dominance to heart, you know, like receiving love and looking at food in a more you know, in a different lens, and not feeling like you have to know everything and do everything. And that's such a integrative shift of consciousness.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
Yeah. And then we ultimately, you know, I guess I had options for where I could birth, you know, staying in the DR was one of them. I had family in DR, I had family in Omaha, I had family, or you know, friends' family here. And I had options. I think this place was always in our hearts to come here, you know, and I just had to take one step at a time. So like my birth wasn't even on my mind, and I ended up flying here at 40 weeks pregnant. And
you went to Omaha first, right? And got your apothecary like in gear to prep so that you could chill. And then you flew here.
Yeah. I flew here, and then, you know, get our car down here. We had got that set up.
We found an Airbnb.
It
was 2 minutes down the road.
Yeah, it was the best Airbnb ever.
Yeah, say about that, because that is kind of amazing.
This Airbnb, I mean, obviously selling my home in Omaha, staying in a lot of Airbnbs in DR, doing this house shopping, searching for Airbnbs here to have my baby. I mean,
being a retired control freak. I'm very, very picky about certain things, of course, when it comes to where I'm going to be staying, and especially when it's like where I'm going to be birthing my baby. Totally.
And somehow we found this Airbnb that's just like, it was decorated to like my perfect style, like everything about it was amazing, in a town full of like log cabin,
like, rustic
taxidermy
quilts
on the wall.
Quilts on the wall, just like wood.
It was like, it couldn't have been better. So I felt like so at home instantly when we got there. You know, and we just started life here. Like, you know, we got here on a Saturday, and my daughter started yurt school on Monday. You know what I mean? And like, it was just so easy to just like drop in. And I felt so at home. You know, some of the women I was meeting for the first time, some of them I hadn't seen in a while. And, you know, I just felt so integrated and easy from the beginning.
And it was Luna's birthday, like right away.
Yeah, Luna's birthday was that Sunday. So it was like Saturday we got there, Sunday was her birthday, and then Monday she started school. And then I had like even though I flew here at 40 weeks, I had like a 2-week adjustment period of just like chilling. Yeah, we flew on a Saturday and I birthed on a Saturday 2 weeks later.
So tell me about, yeah, just like at this point now you're here, you're thinking about it. What's the setup? What's Javi like how do you drop into, especially because of your like kind of shit show of a first story, like how much fear is there to navigate with you two? I mean, it's a lot. That's a lot to just like come to a town, rent an Airbnb, be due any second. Yeah, friends are great. I mean, we're exceptionally magical, but that's a lot to just be like, we're doing this.
Yeah.
And particularly with this pretty dramatic surgical experience last time.
I mean, I want to be very clear that like my husband was terrified. He was terrified. We talked, and like he was open about that. And I wasn't scared at all. And he trusted me. And I mean, it always came down to like him being like, if you were to say, and like, he never said this to me, but like, I know that if I would have been like, screw it, let's go to the hospital. He would have been like, thank God,
yes,
let's go.
100%.
Yes. But at the same time, like he really honored.
But he never brought it up, which was nice.
Yeah. And he really just honored what he would just, honored my, I don't even want to say my choice, just like
he was along for the ride.
He was along for the ride. Yeah.
I really respect that because he was really scared and nervous. And he didn't like harp on it, like when I asked him about it, he was honest, about his fears and his questions, but it wasn't like he was making the whole thing about him or taking it over. And he certainly didn't ruin your birth in any way, shape, or form. And, I really respect that because I think that's a really appropriate role, right? Like, of course he's scared. That's, and I say this to women all the time, like, of course your partner is scared. Of course he's nervous. That makes sense to me. Maybe after 3 births at home, he won't be. And I mean, even after, I don't know if he'll have more kids, obviously, but even after this one, he's, the evolution for him keeps pushing the needle too. But women are so socialized to hero their husbands and to do everything we can for them to never feel discomfort or nervousness or fear. And you and I don't have marriages like that. We're both like, figure it out and I love you. We don't take that on. And it really shows, it shows in the health of the relationship and in how his willingness and capacity and really maturity to show up in such a sweet way. I mean, he was so great. And I don't know how scared he was at the actual birth.
I don't think he was scared of
and that's pretty common too, that men think it's going to be really scary. He was really nervous about the blood, remember? And then he was totally great.
Yeah.
That's quite common.
Yeah. He was my main source. He was my
only
source. He was my main source of support. Yeah.
He kept washing his hands when he would get blood on it. He's a little squeamish. Is that the word?
Yeah.
Okay. So end of pregnancy. What else do you want to share before you get into the story?
Yeah, that's it. It was so easy. Even at 42 weeks, it was like a surprise to go into labor for me. So I was just like hanging out,
Yeah, you did that right. You were very chill.
Yeah. So I guess it kind of all the story starts with me waking up on a Saturday morning, early, like 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'd been having kind of like practice contractions for a while, like actually very early on in my pregnancy. But I felt these practice contractions, but I was feeling them in my throat too. Like when my uterus would contract, my throat would contract.
That's crazy.
And I remember thinking like, oh, this is interesting. Because there's like that throat cervix connection. And I actually, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I got on the membership because another woman had posted like, hey, I'm feeling contractions in my throat. Has anyone ever experienced this? So I got on my comment and I was like, whatever happened with that? Did you have a baby? I don't even know if she ever replied or not, but, and then I went back to bed and I woke up in the morning and we had brunch plans. And so
with like 12 of us,
there were so many of us, as all the people, all of the friends and partners and kids, and we're at this big table and our kids are being crazy and there's food's being passed around and we don't know whose food is whose. And it was totally comical.
And Buzz burned his tongue.
Yeah. Our friend's little son burned his mouth on hot chocolate and was crying. And
A classic brunch.
it was a crazy brunch. And I just remember sitting there and I realized I was like, I feel like I'm like stoned. Like, I feel like I'm not experiencing any of this.
Well, what you said was, I feel like I'm the only one that smoked a joint at the party.
Yeah, that's what I felt like. I was just like, oh, none of this is happening, but it is, you know, it was so weird. And then as we were leaving, you took a photo of the three of us, me, Javier, and Luna, and you said, oh, this could be your last photo as a family of 3. And I was just kind of like, oh, whatever. Oh, and the reason why we all went to brunch was because our friend Meg had come into town the night before and she was staying the weekend and she was staying with me. So she was there.
And I love that there was no talk about her being at your birth.
No.
Like there was from her.
Yeah.
She was like, you better give birth. I want to be here. But it was all just so casual and not planned. And I just love the distinction of how you described your first birth with what did you call it?
My birth plan. Like
foolproof or solid. What was the word you used?
I don't remember, but yeah.
Ironclad. Yeah. And then you come here and it's just also loosey goosey. And it's like, you had all the right ingredients. You had the right people, you had the right mentality, you have a wonderful marriage. Like everything is chill. And you really got to, gosh, I mean, well into postpartum, I mean, into now, you got to see what it's like in your life to just flow.
Yeah.
Right.
Which
wasn't
I've never done before. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like so funny because like, of course, who has a friend to come stay with them casually when they're 42 weeks pregnant, like with no expectation of having a baby. But I was, and so she was with us and I think we all like took a nap in the afternoon. And when I woke up from the nap, I was kind of like starting to feel contractions and she's also pregnant. Yeah. And I had said, like, I was expecting this stage to go on for days. Like, I was just like, I'm going to be crabby and have contractions off and on with no pattern for days. And this is just going to, in my mind, I was like, this is just what it's going to be like for a couple of days. I'm getting close. Like I'm 42 weeks pregnant. Yeah. I was like, let's just go on a walk because I don't want to it's going to be days of this. I'm going to have to stay as busy as possible because.
And the story goes that she's in total denial, appropriately so, best thing you can do at this stage. But all of our friends who are with her, there's like 4 of them with her over on where the festival are all like, she's in labor, she's in labor. So everyone knew but you.
So we were walking around Moonspring. There's like a playground there where our kids were all playing. We had sent the text out like, oh, I'm going to go walk around if anyone wants to bring the kids and meet up. And so we were all just kind of there maybe for like an hour, like chatting. And I had this thought, I had a contraction, like the first contraction that I had that was like really painful that I had to like stop and breathe and like, just like the first one, I had this thought where I was like, damn it, I forgot how much this sucks. Like I forgot how much this sucks. Why did I do this to myself? I should just go to the hospital right now. Like I should just go. I don't want to do this for 3 days. This is going to suck. I'm just going to go to the hospital and get it over with. And then in my mind, I'm like, okay, that's an interesting thought. Let's walk through that. What would happen? So I picture in my mind, Javier driving me to the hospital. But yeah, I mean, I just thought about it. I was like, what would that look like? We'd go to the ER. They'd do a cervical check. And as soon as I thought about that, I was like, no, that's not for me.
Yeah.
So got that out of the way, easy. And then we were driving home and Meg said, are you hungry? And I said, no. And she goes, everyone else is starving. I'm going to go to the store and make some tacos. So I'm going to drop you off, go to the store. And it was when I was in the car, I was like super uncomfortable. And I was like, I think I'm in labor. Like this sucks, being in the car. I think I was like on the dashboard, like propped up.
And this is like what, 6 or 7 p.m.?
No, it was like 7:45.
Okay.
Because we walked in the house. I looked at the clock. It was 8 o'clock. And I said to Javi, I think I'm in labor. I'm gonna get in the tub, see if it slows down a little bit, but I might be in labor. And I never left the tub. So I filled the tub up and the contractions got stronger instead of slowing them down like I figured they would. And my 4-year-old daughter Luna was in the tub with me, very sweetly behind me. In between contraction or during contraction, she'd rub my back and tell me I was okay and I was doing a good job, which wasn't like, we never talked about labor or anything.
So
she
cute.
just like was there. It was so sweet.
4-year-olds are the best.
She was so great. And then it got to the point where I didn't want her there anymore. And it was perfect because it was right when Meg got home. And so Meg got home, started making tacos, and her and Luna were in there making tacos. And my husband Javier came in, and, you know, we were just doing the thing, you know, I was super uncomfortable. None of the positioning that worked with Luna helped this time, because anytime I'd like bend forward or anything, it just felt like I was gonna like break a baby in half. She was just like, I assume she was just like so low. But you know, I'm still expecting like this to be going on for a very long time.
Right. And for context, you're actually going to give birth from this time in like an hour.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I had like from the time I walked in the house, she was born an hour and 20 minutes later. So yeah, we tried doing like, you know, lifting the belly, we tried counter pressure. It all sucked. It was all just like, I was just like, okay, I just have to let this happen. You know, there was nothing else. And so my water broke at some point, and Javi texted you. My water broke at 9. And I think we were like, can you come over? And when I look back on that message, it's so funny because I had texted you and I was like 30 minutes prior, and I was like, I think I'm starting to go into labor. And you were like, how are you doing? And I'm like, it kind of sucks. I forgot it sucks. And then the next message was like, would you please come over to my house? And you were like, why?
Are you normal? The texting's not good for that stuff.
And yeah, so then
would you please come over?
Yeah, I was like, could you please come over? Like totally normal.
But in reality, you're like in the tub.
But in reality, I was like, I have to type this message out right now before I like. And so yeah, so I was just in the tub. My husband was just kind of in there. I think he was squeezing my hand a lot. That was like the only thing that I was like, he'd just like squeeze my hand and I would curse, and then it'd be over. There was a very brief time right before the baby started coming out where I just like laid back in the tub and I was so tired. And I remember turning to my husband and I was like, I think I could fall asleep right now. And I like laid back and like dozed for a minute until the next contraction. And then I felt her head basically. It hurt. I like burned, you know, like I felt like my skin around her head, like stretching. And I was like, don't want this to happen. Like, I don't want this to happen right now. And ultimately, you know, I felt her head trying to come through a couple times. And then I was like, but I want this birth to be over. So like, it has to come through. And so I literally just the next time it tried to come through, I just shouted as loud as I could, like to really just like let this baby come through. And I swear, like, I was so loud that I could swear I could like see my sound waves like reverberating through the house in my like high birth state.
Oh my God.
It was insane. I was like, oh, but the head came out. And then I felt so much relief. Like it just felt so good to have the head out of my body. Just like immediate, just like deep breath.
You're standing in the shower, right?
I'm standing in the tub. I had one leg out of the tub, one leg in, and I was standing. And I was guiding her head with my hands. And then it was the perfect timing. Meg and Luna just popped their heads in, and Meg was going to put Luna to bed. Meg was like coming in to say goodnight. And I just look up and I was laughing and I was like, we got ahead. And she was like, oh my God, do you want me to film? And I was like, oh yeah. And so, cause we were just so in it, like that obviously wasn't even thought about. So that was perfect timing. Luna was able to like watch. She like got right up close and personal, was looking at the head coming out. And then one more contraction and I just caught her and then dropped her in the pool and picked her in the tub and picked her right back up.
I caught her and then I dropped her.
Yes.
And then I picked her
came out. I had her in my hands and then she just kind of like slipped through.
That's funny.
I totally thought she was a boy. I just looked at her face and I was like, oh, this is my boy. And sat down in the tub and was just kind of, you know, doing the mom thing where I'm, you know, checking her out, and him at the time. And you know, I did a little suction and rubbed their back and just talked and like, you did it, we did it, it's so amazing, you're doing such a good job, baby, you know, all the things. And then because she was sleeping, you know, she came out sleeping and just so relaxed. And then so finally she like opened her eyes, cried one cry, and then went back to sleep. And I think that one cry was when you were coming in, that you walked in. And then I checked and it was a girl. And I was like, oh my God, it's another girl.
Yeah, you were so surprised.
Luna was so happy to have a sister. Oh, and this was like my best memory of the whole thing was that she had gone, I guess she had been collecting items while I was in labor. She had grabbed like the nursing pillow and a onesie and had made the baby a card. And so when she came in to say goodnight and the head was out, she ran and got or after the baby was born, she ran and got all of those things. And she was waiting with the card and the onesie to like,
and had the boppy
under her arm, like ready to like give the baby this card. It was so sweet. I still have it.
It was so cute.
Yeah, it was so cute. Oh, it was like amazing. And it was an hour and 20 minutes. Like it was literally an hour and 20 minutes. It was insane. And I thought I was going to have this like 3-day birth, you know?
Well, and this is such a good example of, depending on where you want to start it, you know, she could have in the morning when she felt stoned and was having contractions, she could have been like, I'm starting, and then complained all day and been miserable. And then her story would be that she had a 14-hour birth. You know, like this is the proof to just push it off as long as you can and like not take it that seriously and just go about your day, because then you get to think you had an hour and a half birth, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then what?
So then you were there, which was perfect timing, because there was a lot of stuff that probably would have been tricky, you know, if I hadn't had someone there to guide me through the process of like, and my partner too, like getting out of the tub, getting into the bed with the baby, getting, you know, helping my placenta come through. Because that was something I really didn't want to do. I didn't want to birth my placenta. We all knew it was ready. It was right there, but I didn't want to do it. My muscles were so sore. I was cramping.
You were having a spasm.
Yeah. I had like a Charlie horse from like all the everything. And I didn't want to deliver my placenta. And I did, thanks to you being like, hey, you're going to feel a lot better. Just do it. So I did it and it was fine.
That is like one of the few things that I'm kind of bossy about at births.
Yeah. I appreciated it.
Totally. Yeah. No, I think it's what's right.
Yeah.
Because like, don't get comfy with it in.
Yeah. Oh, I totally would have done
that. I know you wanted to just lay down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it would have been a whole nother thing of it just, it was appropriate time for it to come out, and it
definitely was so much better.
So much better. Yeah. And then, Meg brought us tacos in bed. I just snuggled up with that baby. We all ate tacos. It was
Luna
great.
Was still awake.
Luna was still awake. She was like on her own little high.
She was. Yeah.
You put Luna to bed, and then when she was sleeping, I think we brought her back in the bed because I wanted us to all wake up together in the morning. But
Meg cut the cord.
And when I woke up in the morning, it was just the 4 of us. It was amazing.
Yeah, and she nursed right away. She nursed in the tub.
Like sleeping. Yeah. And she nursed. Yeah, she was a great nurser from day one. It was great. It was so simple. And like obviously like a very powerful moment in my life, but it's not like, it wasn't like, oh, before and after my free birth, you know what I mean? Or it wasn't like, it was just like another day, which is what I think was so cool about it. Because I think in the society of traumatic birth, birth is like huge, you know, it's like this, like, And it can be this huge monumental transformative event, but it can also just be like another day without like the weirdness of like, oh, birth's just another day and then women go back to work the next day. Like it was just another day in my life, and I just continued on.
Well, I think we hear that a lot with free birthers who are not first time moms.
Yeah.
You know, because they're quicker births, right?
Yes.
So like first time moms, unless they're having quick births, with which most don't, it is a big deal because it's like 3 freaking days, right? So it's like a whole marathon. But for second and on, it's usually just like a couple hours of like the real stuff. And so it's integrated. And so many women say that on the podcast, that it was like the most special, perfect day and just another day. And kind of, you know, when a lot of women tell their stories, it's like,
that's it.
There's not much to say. Like I had some contractions and I had a baby and I got in bed. And I love that, because we need to keep, because of you pointing to like the dramatization of the hospital birth, you know, I want women to know that birth can be and really works best as this integrated, just another day. Of course, it's special and
it's part of your day.
Yeah, like you screamed a little bit and then laid in bed and ate tacos. Yeah, and went to sleep.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your postpartum, and then we'll wrap. So it was so fun, you know, for us to support you, because you're the first birthing woman in our crew since this whole little utopia has gotten set up. So what do you want to share about what not just about what it's like, but then also, you know, a bit of compare and contrast, I guess.
I mean, it was amazing. I felt it was just so fun, you know, like I had women in and out of my house every day. It was like a girls' night every day, but like also like feeling so supported, and like, you know, my house was always clean. I always had food, you know, like
it was super hot.
Much to everyone else's discomfort. Very cold-blooded, and I like things really warm. So postpartum, it was like so hot.
That was brutal.
Yeah.
She had, what month was it? April? She had like a fire going. We were all like sweating, but
half the women supporting me were pregnant, so already running extra hot. But yeah, it was great. We like hang out and cook, and well, you guys would cook and I would just lay there naked. I never put clothes on, like I just lay there naked, and it was amazing.
It was so fun. And it was so fun for us too. That's the other thing I want to say, because of course, a new baby, of course, your friend having a baby is so cute and fun and you want to see her. But serving, it's like a peak woman, sister, friend, like love bubble, you know, like everyone wants to be a part of it, you know.
It was like a love bubble.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it was so great. It was so special.
Anything else you want to say about it? I guess we could go to, you stay in bed. We all just love on you. Everyone's doing different stuff. You know, we have one woman making food for their family. One woman's coming over and massaging your breasts and your womb and bringing you lavender lattes. And Erica and I are just mostly laying in your bed making you laugh. Yeah. And just whatever needed to happen. It was just so wonderful for all of us. And knowing that this was like the first baby of our crew, and Erica and I both being pregnant, and so fun. It was quite utopian.
Set the bar high. I mean,
but also it was so chill.
Yeah.
And easy.
Yeah.
Like no one was spending money.
Yeah.
You know?
At 6 weeks, when I started to kind of come out of my cave a little bit more, we did a closing of the bones ceremony here in this room with everybody. Which was really cool, and buried our placenta over on Moonspring. And in the rain. Yeah.
Your husband dug the hole.
Yeah.
I loved it. We used rainwater to clean your blood.
To clean my hands.
That was pretty sweet.
It was really special. And then I used the festival as kind of like my re-entry into society. It had been my 3-month mark, and I just kind of felt ready. And so that was it was like so great to like come out back into the world, like surrounded by women. It's
Over
like
there.
such a beautiful container.
Seriously.
And of course I was still like so supported. Like where else would I be? Where I just, yeah, it was amazing.
Oh, also, what week postpartum were you when you moved to our yurt?
6.
You were 6 weeks.
Mhm.
So she had the Airbnb where she birthed, and then everything just takes, forever when we were trying to do stuff. And so we didn't even know if she was going to be able to move into the yurt or birth in the yurt, but it took 6 weeks. One of them, we have 4 on the property, but the very top one is now like a rental. And so her family moved into that, and it's literally just up the hill from my house. So that was like, it just kept getting better and better, because her daughter and my daughter could, like me or Erica could go pick them up in the golf cart and take them to school while she's home with the baby resting. And just the whole thing was so fun.
It was so fun.
It was like summer camp.
It was summer camp. Yeah.
I mean, it's still like that. It's really, really fun.
Yeah. So.
And then Hobby started doing work, like
Around
helping
here,
us.
yeah.
And that was really fun to bring him in and get to know him in a much more integrated way, because he was here. So we were having meals together, and that was a really nice flow of your postpartum.
Yeah. I'm excited to pay it forward for when you and Erica have your babies. And
anything you want to mention about the integration of the daughters or the sisters?
just that it was so simple, I always hear about people, like people's children being so emotional, the older ones being so emotional or having a lot of feelings about it, or maybe experiencing jealousy or frustration at not being the only child anymore. And, we didn't really experience that at all. Luna loved her sister from day one, and
Well, she ignored her for 2 weeks.
she ignored her for 2 weeks until I bathed her, because she said that she smelled.
But she told her dad that story.
Yeah, so it was funny because at first Luna just like wasn't really interested at all. Like she wouldn't come near me. She wouldn't come near the baby. And
But not in a dramatic
way. She just wasn't interested. And I guess Javi was driving her to school, and she said, "Papa, it's because the baby smells."
Do
like,
something.
Almost like needing, like, you got to do something about it.
To be clear, you did not.
She didn't smell, but as soon as I gave her first bath, Luna started coming around. So
That's funny.
yeah, she has a very sensitive sense of smell. Yeah, I was waiting, like it kind of felt like I was waiting for the big emotion to come through, or like the big, and then I just realized, I was like, it's just a gift. Like, let it be a gift of peaceful integration. And it was so easy and lovely and wonderful. And there was no issue. And I think one of the big parts about that, I did really communicate with her when I was pregnant how things would be. Luna was being held too by all of you, she was really supported. So I think that made a world of difference.
Well, she like had a whole life going on here.
Best social life ever.
Totally.
Yeah. So yeah.
Love it.
It was great.
What a
It was
great
perfect.
story. It was really perfect.
Yeah. There's nothing that could have been better.
Seriously. We see so many women have perfect babies and pretty good setups and still pathologize the whole situation. Looking for something to be wrong, waiting for something to be wrong, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it's like they're missing what's actually happening, which is perfect.
Yeah.
And letting something be easy is a choice, right? We can let something be easy or not. And so I'm just so glad that you had enough awareness in like such a peak, situation that we all co-created. Yeah. Let it be easy.
Yeah. From start to finish.
And then you don't have to like wait for something bad to happen. I mean, that's a real shift.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
It's a fun way to start the season. Stay tuned. We have lots of more amazing episodes coming up. It's going to probably be shot all funny. Like some of these will be me super pregnant, and then I just like won't be. All right. Where can women find you? We've talked about your herbalism. We'll put links in the show notes, but if you just want to say anywhere that you want to shout out for where women can find you.
Sure. You can find me on Instagram at Arielle de Martinez, or my website, arieldemartinez.com.
Bye.
And
And that's it for today, my sisters. Check out everything we do, including one-on-one and group coaching, learn about our private membership, in-person retreats, and more on freebirthsociety.com. Our online courses are on freebirthsocietycourses.com, including our flagship course, The Complete Guide to Free Birth. Don't miss the Radical Birthkeeper School if you're ready to become the authentic midwife that women are searching for. Together we rise, and the revolution starts inside each of us. I'll leave you with our Free Birth Society theme song, Wild Woman by Aruba Red.
I honor you for the wisdom you held, the ancient traditions of plant medicine and womb magic. I feel the spirit of the ancestors as I place my hands upon my belly. This sacred portal will be honored. Eons upon light beams of survival, withstanding the eradication of our power by design. I will not allow the separation of our young to be forced upon me. My sisters will no longer birth in captivity. The picket line redefined from burning our wild women to paralyzing us and drugging our babes. Strapped down in a clinical white bed, drying up the milk from our breasts. Keep your needles. My family will never again be doomed to chase those dragons or your poison. We reject your fear. We choose love. Everything with intention. Death, ascension. I will fly and bring her back